History books are filled with heroes, wars, and noble ideas. This is not that story. This is the story of the moments history class conveniently forgot. The bad ideas, the bizarre laws, and the moments of pure, unfiltered absurdity that truly define a nation. So pour yourself a drink, get comfortable, and prepare to question everything you thought you knew about America's past. 1. In the 1800s, the answer to all of life's problems wasn't philosophy or prayer. It was the humble tomato. If you were depressed, suffering from a headache, or just generally feeling unwell, the cure was apparently in your garden. Doctors, in a move that would make modern medicine weep, began prescribing tomato pills. These weren't some complex extract. They were essentially concentrated ketchup capsules. This wasn't some back-alley quackery. It was a mainstream medical trend. Of course, the shocking revelation decades later was that the real miracle wasn't the tomato itself, but the fact that people were finally consuming a single vitamin for the first time in their lives. 2. Just when you thought 19th century medicine couldn't get any stranger, it introduced mummy powder. For a handsome price, you could purchase a remedy called mumia, which was exactly what it sounds like: the pulverized, dusty remains of an ancient Egyptian. The logic of who first looked at a sarcophagus and thought, "I bet that cures baldness," is lost to history. This disturbing wellness trend was thankfully short-lived, primarily because the supply chain depended on raiding tombs. It turns out that even in the 1800s, desecrating ancient burial sites for a questionable health supplement was a poor long-term business model. It gives ancient remedies a whole new meaning, doesn't it? 3. In 1915, while much of the world was gearing up for war, some true American patriots were focused on a more pressing issue: toilet paper. The household product was becoming popular, and a campaign was launched to establish a National Toilet Paper Day in its honor. Imagine for a moment serious-faced politicians debating the merits of quilted versus two-ply on the Senate floor. The campaign ultimately got flushed away by more significant world events, but for a brief, glorious period, the absorbency and texture of toilet tissue was a matter of national pride. What a time to be alive! 4. Elections are always tense, but imagine winning the governorship of Ohio in 1893 and being the last person to find out. Thanks to a delinquent telegram, that's exactly what happened to Charles Anderson. For weeks, he was likely going about his daily life, probably complaining about the new governor, completely unaware that he was the new governor. The state of Ohio was essentially running on autopilot, while its leader was left completely in the dark. It's the ultimate political cliffhanger, powered by 19th century internet speeds, and a terrifying testament to the importance of checking your messages. 5. New Orleans in the early 1800s had a unique ambiance. A delightful mix of live music, incredible food, and rampaging herds of feral pigs. These hogs owned the streets, causing chaos everywhere. The city council, faced with this swine apocalypse, devised a solution that addressed absolutely none of the core issues. They didn't remove the pigs. Instead, they passed a law requiring every single one to wear a bell. This brilliant move didn't reduce the pig population. It just added a chilling, festive soundtrack to the mayhem. It was less of a solution and more of an early warning system for the impending pork stampede. 6. The bald eagle is a majestic symbol of American might, but we were dangerously close to having our national identity represented by a bird more commonly associated with gravy and stuffing. Founding Father Benjamin Franklin launched a one-man crusade against the eagle, calling it a lazy scavenger with bad moral character. His preferred candidate was the turkey, which he considered a much more respectable bird. Just picture it: the presidential seal, military banners, and currency all adorned with a turkey. Holiday dinners would have become an act of treason. 7. Some people dream of owning a home. A Californian man in 1929 dreamt bigger. He wanted to become the moon's first real estate agent. His logic was a masterpiece of corporate loophole finding. Since no nation had officially claimed it, he declared it open for business. He began selling parcels of lunar land, likely advertising its unobstructed views and zero noisy neighbors. Shockingly, the public didn't jump at the chance to buy a property with a 238,000-mile commute and a severe lack of breathable air. A true visionary, just several centuries and a few $1 trillion of infrastructure ahead of his time. 8. For over a century, one cow has taken all the blame for the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Mrs. O'Leary's cow has been painted as the clumsiest, most destructive bovine in history. Well, it's time to clear her name. The real story is far less charming and much more pathetic. Historical evidence strongly suggests the fire was actually started by a group of gamblers who knocked over a lantern in the same barn, likely after one of them lost his shirt in a card game. So a legendary disaster wasn't an act of God or animal misfortune, but a classic, predictable case of human stupidity. Our apologies to the cow. 9. The Final Frontier, a place of scientific marvels, human courage, and smuggled deli meats. In 1962, while orbiting the Earth, legendary astronaut John Glenn decided the mission was missing a certain culinary flair. He had hidden a corned beef sandwich in his spacesuit, planning a truly out-of-this-world lunch. But as he took a bite, physics took over. Crumbs began floating everywhere, threatening to clog the delicate instruments of his multi-million-dollar spacecraft. Suddenly, a simple sandwich became a potential agent of cosmic catastrophe. It proves that no matter how advanced our technology gets, we're never more than one bad decision away from jeopardizing everything for a snack. 10. Forget the Cold War. One of America's most bizarre international conflicts was the Chicken War. In the early 1960s, European nations hit American chicken with high tariffs, and the United States did not take this poultry-based aggression lightly. In a spectacular act of retaliation, President Johnson slapped a 25% tax on imported light trucks, directly targeting products like the beloved Volkswagen vans. So, a squabble over frozen chicken parts ended up completely reshaping the American auto market, a consequence that still exists today. It's a sobering reminder that international diplomacy is a delicate dance, and sometimes it gets tripped up by a drumstick. 11. If you blinked, you might have missed the shortest war in American history. In 1898, a territorial dispute was brewing off the coast of Nicaragua. The U.S. Navy's solution was a masterclass in efficiency. They sent a single warship which sailed into position, prominently displayed its massive cannons, and essentially stared the other side into submission. The entire conflict, from arrival to resolution, lasted just 37 minutes. No shots were fired, no treaties signed. It was a military operation that was over before the paperwork could even be filed. The sailors were probably back on deck in time for lunch. 12. Everyone has heard that George Washington had wooden teeth, a quaint and folksy detail about a founding father. Well, the truth is infinitely more horrifying. Forget wood. His dentures were a grotesque Frankenstein's monster of materials, including ivory, metal springs, and yes, actual human teeth he purchased. Just try to imagine the sheer discomfort of that contraption. Every smile, every speech, every meal was a battle against a set of teeth that belonged in a horror museum. Suddenly, his famously stoic expression on all those portraits makes a lot more sense. He wasn't deep in thought. He was just trying to keep his face from falling apart. 13. In 1943, at the height of World War II, the Pentagon faced a rebellion from within. The enemy wasn't a foreign power, but the cafeteria menu. It served liver so relentlessly, day after day, that the employees, the very people running the war effort, went on strike. This wasn't a quiet complaint. It was the Great Liver Revolt. They formed picket lines and demanded culinary liberation. The most powerful military headquarters on Earth was brought to its knees by a universally despised organ meat. Officials quickly surrendered and changed the menu, proving that you can strategize global conflict, but you cannot force people to eat liver. 14. Teddy Roosevelt, the rugged outdoorsman and champion of conservation, once made a powerful enemy, his own children. In 1906, citing environmental concerns about cutting down trees, Roosevelt banned Christmas trees from the White House. But his sons, Archie and Quentin, were not about to let their father's principles ruin the holiday. In a covert operation, they smuggled a small tree into the mansion and decorated it in their room. It's a heartwarming story about the magic of Christmas, but also a hilarious lesson that no matter how tough you are, you simply cannot win a war against kids who are determined to get presents. 15. Long before the internet got weird, A small town in 1930s Texas was already pushing the boundaries of strange competitions. They decided to host a beauty contest where the main event wasn't the face, but the feet. To ensure impartial judgment, female contestants had their faces and bodies completely covered, with only their feet visible to the judges. Forget a winning smile or a sparkling personality. Victory depended on a well-formed arch and aesthetically pleasing toes. One can only imagine the judging criteria. Was there a talent portion involving wiggling one's big toe? It was a bold attempt to find beauty in the unexpected, and also just deeply, deeply bizarre. 16. In 1950, residents of a small town in South Carolina received a very special delivery from the U.S. Air Force, an entire nuclear bomb. Thankfully, due to a spectacular stroke of luck, the bomb wasn't armed and failed to detonate upon impact. It did, however, perform a bit of unscheduled home renovation by leaving a massive crater in a family's backyard. Imagine trying to explain that to your insurance agent. Yes, the damage was caused by an act of the Air Force accidentally dropping a weapon of mass destruction. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the biggest threat isn't the enemy, but a case of oops. 17. During Prohibition, necessity wasn't just the mother of invention, it was the mother of some truly theatrical engineering. To bypass the ban on alcohol, many speakeasies disguised themselves as innocent-looking soda shops. But if you knew the secret password, the entire soda fountain counter, a massive, heavy piece of equipment, would slide back to reveal a hidden, fully stocked bar behind it. It was like something out of a spy film, but instead of secret documents, the prize was a glass of bootleg whiskey. Going for a root beer float could land you in a secret world of jazz, gangsters, and questionable gin. 18. The town of Shamrock, Texas, once attempted a political power move of epic proportions. In 1930, they launched a campaign to make St. Patrick's Day a federal holiday. Their argument wasn't based on historical significance or cultural importance. Their entire case rested on the fact that their town was named Shamrock, and they felt that entitled them, and the rest of the country, to a giant government-sanctioned party. Congress, unsurprisingly, was not convinced by this flawless logic. The bill failed, but the town of Shamrock never let bureaucracy get in the way of a good time and continues to celebrate with unapologetic enthusiasm every year. 19. If you thought mummy powder was the peak of strange medicine, let me introduce you to 19th century urine therapy. Prominent doctors and wellness gurus seriously advocated for people to drink their own urine to cure diseases, improve their complexion, and achieve overall vitality. It was promoted as the ultimate organic, locally sourced wellness product, decades before that was even a concept. This wasn't some fringe idea. It was a published and debated medical practice. You have to feel for their neighbors, who probably had to listen to them explain the health benefits over the garden fence. It really makes you appreciate modern bottled water. 20. During World War II, the US government needed to know what a nuclear bomb would do to a typical American suburb. So they did the most logical thing possible. They built one from scratch in the Tennessee desert just to blow it up. This wasn't some half-hearted effort with cardboard cutouts. They constructed entire fake neighborhoods, complete with fully furnished houses, cars in the driveways, and even mannequin families placed inside, forever frozen in domestic bliss. It was a terrifyingly detailed, government-funded dress rehearsal for the apocalypse. America truly has a go big or go home attitude, even when going big means vaporizing a fake town. 21. The state of Wisconsin was once the scene of a bitter and surprisingly violent conflict that wasn't about land or politics, but about trees. In the 19th century, a full-blown war erupted between powerful logging companies and local vigilantes who were fed up with the deforestation. These weren't peaceful protesters. They were saboteurs who conducted raids on logging camps, stole equipment, and even sank entire rafts of logs in the rivers. It was a gritty, high-stakes battle fought in the deep woods, proving that arguments over resource management could get just as dramatic as any Wild West shootout. Who knew forestry had a dark, action-packed underbelly? 22. In 1932, the U.S. Army unveiled what it thought was a game-changing piece of military technology: helium-filled, floating tanks. The idea was brilliant in its sheer audacity. Why slog through trenches when you can just float over them? In theory, it was a revolution in warfare. In practice, however, they quickly discovered a rather significant design flaw. The tanks, while menacing, were incredibly easy to pop. They were essentially giant, angry-looking party balloons that could be brought down by a single, well-aimed shot. The project was quickly abandoned, presumably after some poor soldier had to report that the enemy had defeated their armored division with a handful of sharp sticks. 23. Most states have an official bird, flower, or tree. Massachusetts, however, decided to focus on what truly matters. In an act of profound legislative wisdom, they officially designated the Boston cream donut as the state donut. This wasn't a joke. It was a serious declaration of the state's love for the custard-filled dessert. You have to respect the priorities. While other states were busy debating tax codes, lawmakers in Massachusetts were ensuring that a specific type of pastry received the official recognition it deserved. Somewhere out there, the states of jelly and glazed are seething with jealousy. 24. Navigating the dark, crater-filled surface of the moon is a serious challenge. In 1974, the US government came up with a solution so simple, so bold, it's a miracle it never happened. They considered painting the moon. The proposal suggested painting a large portion of the lunar surface bright red to act as a giant glowing landmark for astronauts. It would have transformed our beautiful, mysterious moon into the universe's largest traffic cone. Thankfully, someone in a position of power eventually realized the logistical nightmare of such a project, and the plan was scrapped. The moon was spared the indignity of a cosmic paint job. 25. A presidential campaign needs a strong mascot, something that projects power and dignity. In 1916, President Woodrow Wilson chose a ram. But this wasn't just any ram. This was Old Ike, a creature famous for two things: an incredibly aggressive temperament and a deep, abiding love for chewing tobacco. Wilson would proudly parade this ill-tempered, cud-spitting sheep at campaign events as a symbol of his administration. It's hard to imagine a more bizarre political spectacle. Nothing quite says 4 more years, like a farm animal that's ready to both headbutt you and spit tobacco juice on your shoes. 26. Teddy Roosevelt, the ultimate man's man, is responsible for one of the most beloved children's toys in history. In 1902, during a hunting trip, Roosevelt famously refused to shoot a bear cub that his aides had tied to a tree, deeming it unsportsmanlike. A political cartoonist captured the moment. A toy maker saw the cartoon, and suddenly the teddy bear was born. Without even trying, Roosevelt became the face of a marketing phenomenon. It's the perfect encapsulation of his legacy. A rugged hunter who could project so much strength that his one act of mercy accidentally created a multi-million-dollar industry based on cuddly animals. 27. During World War II, the Allied forces were brainstorming ideas for unsinkable warships. Someone in the British Navy, with a little help from the US, came up with a truly mind-bending concept: an aircraft carrier made almost entirely of ice. The top-secret plan, Project Habakkuk, involved mixing wood pulp with ice to create a super-strong, buoyant material called pykrete. They envisioned a fleet of these colossal, frozen fortresses. The idea was brilliant until they hit one small, incredibly obvious snag: how to stop a 2-million-ton ice ship from melting in the middle of the ocean. The project was quietly abandoned. 28. Benjamin Franklin was a certified genius, but even geniuses have their strange moments. Among his many inventions was a musical instrument called the glass harmonica. It consisted of a series of spinning glass bowls that produced an eerie, ethereal sound when touched with wet fingers. It became popular for a time, but it also developed a sinister reputation. Audiences reported that the ghostly music caused fainting spells, nervous breakdowns, and even bouts of hysteria. It was the world's first and perhaps only musical instrument that came with a psychological warning label. Unsurprisingly, it never quite replaced the good old piano. 29. The Great Depression was a bleak era, but American suburbs got an unexpectedly cheerful makeover. Paint companies, struggling like everyone else, found that producing a wide range of muted, boring colors was too expensive. Their solution? Churn out cheap, bold, and bright paints. As a result, entire neighborhoods that were financially devastated suddenly looked like a box of crayons had exploded all over them. It was a bizarre, accidental form of national therapy. While people were lining up at soup kitchens, their houses were screaming with vibrant, almost manic joy. It's a strange silver lining. When you can't afford bread, at least you can have a ridiculously yellow house. 30. George Washington, the man who famously rejected the title of king, once had a serious moment of doubt. In 1793, overwhelmed by political infighting, he briefly considered transforming the United States into a monarchy. Not with himself as king, mind you, but by appointing a king-like figure to keep order. Imagine the job posting for that. Wanted: one non-hereditary, democratically adjacent monarch. Must be good at keeping politicians in line, crown not included. Thankfully, he abandoned the idea, realizing that creating a republic and then immediately hiring a king was probably not the best look. It was a close call that could have made the 4th of July a very awkward holiday. 31. If you think your morning alarm is aggressive, be thankful you didn't live in 1899. An inventor from Indiana, who presumably hated sleep with a fiery passion, patented the alarm bed. This wasn't a gentle chime, it was a violent mechanical contraption that physically launched the sleeper out of bed and onto the floor at the designated time. It was the perfect solution for anyone who wanted to start their day with mild trauma and a possible concussion. Unsurprisingly, the invention never became a household staple. People, it turns out, prefer to wake up on their own terms, not by being ejected from their mattress like a piece of toast. 32. Life on the 19th century American frontier was full of dangers, outlaws, harsh weather, and, apparently, river pirates. The fear of pirates on the rivers of Iowa was so legitimate that in 1838, the state passed a law forcing riverboat captains to blast their whistles when passing towns at night. This wasn't a friendly greeting. It was a mandatory signal to reassure terrified citizens that the vessel wasn't crewed by swashbuckling marauders looking to plunder their cornfields. It paints a wonderfully dramatic picture of Midwestern life, where the gentle puff of a steamboat was the only thing standing between a good night's sleep and pirate-induced panic. 33. The U.S. Postal Service has a motto about rain, sleet, and snow, but for a while it should have included "and babies." In the early 20th century, if a family couldn't afford a train ticket, they could literally mail their child. Parents would attach the correct postage to their kids' clothing and hand them over to the mail carrier for delivery to a relative's house. This wasn't a myth, it was a real, if short-lived service. Imagine the postman's route: letters, packages, and a 5-year-old named Mildred. The practice was finally banned in 1915, when the post office officially decided that human beings do not qualify as mailable matter. 34. While the U.S. fought a revolution to get rid of a king, one man decided to bring the monarchy back to Michigan. In the 1850s, a charismatic leader named James Strang declared himself the king of Beaver Island in Lake Michigan. He had a crown, followers he called saints, and even instituted polygamy. For 6 years, he ruled his tiny island kingdom with absolute authority, completely ignoring the U.S. government just a few miles away. His reign ended exactly as you'd expect. Not with a treaty, but with him being assassinated by his own disgruntled followers. America truly has a story for everything. 35. The spirit of American rebellion can be sparked by many things: taxation without representation, political oppression, or, in the case of Yale University in 1827, really bad butter. Students became so disgusted with the rancid, unappetizing butter being served in the dining hall that they launched a full-scale protest known as the Great Butter Rebellion. Their rallying cry, allegedly, was "Give us good butter or give us death." While it lacks the historical gravitas of the Boston Tea Party, you have to admire their commitment. It was a loud and clear message to the administration: you can mess with our curriculum, but you do not mess with our toast. 36. In 1897, the state of Indiana attempted to pass a law that would have made life easier for students, but would have broken mathematics itself. A bill was introduced in the state legislature to legally redefine the value of pi. Instead of the inconvenient 3.14159, it would officially become a neat and tidy 3.2. This was not a joke. The bill passed the House unanimously before a Purdue professor intervened, explaining to the senators that they did not, in fact, have the authority to overrule a fundamental constant of the universe. The bill was shelved, and circles everywhere breathed a sigh of relief. 37. When the United States minted its very first penny in 1793, it wanted an inspiring image of Lady Liberty. What it got was something else entirely. The design featured Liberty with such wild, frizzy, and untamed hair that critics immediately mocked it, saying she looked like she had just been struck by lightning. The public dubbed it the Frightwig Penny. The backlash was so swift that the U.S. Mint had to scrap the design and create a more demure, well-coiffed Liberty later that same year. But for a short time, the official face of American currency looked less like a goddess and more like she'd had a very, very bad day. 38. In 1859, the United States and Great Britain, two of the world's greatest military powers, nearly went to war over a pig. The conflict started on the disputed San Juan Islands when an American farmer shot a British-owned pig for raiding his potato patch. Tempers flared, insults were exchanged, and before anyone knew it, both nations had sent warships and troops to the tiny island. For several tense weeks, the world watched as a full-scale war loomed over a single piece of livestock. Thankfully, cooler heads prevailed. An agreement was reached, and the pig remained the incident's only casualty, cementing its place as the most geopolitically significant farm animal in history. 39. Public speaking is an art, but in 1895, William Jennings Bryan turned it into a form of punishment. During the Democratic National Convention, he delivered a speech that clocked in at a soul-crushing 32,000 words. This wasn't a speech. It was a verbal marathon that nobody signed up for. The air grew hot, the minutes turned to hours, and attendees, trapped by political decorum, literally started fainting from sheer exhaustion and boredom. Bryan may have been passionate about his cause, but he accidentally weaponized the filibuster against his own supporters. It remains the single greatest argument in American history for using bullet points and keeping it brief. 40. The Liberty Bell is a cherished symbol of American freedom, which is ironic because it was a complete failure from the moment it arrived. The bell famously cracked on its very first test ring in 1752. It wasn't a battle scar earned over centuries, it was a factory defect, a return-to-sender moment that they just decided to live with. Instead of being a perfect symbol of liberty, it became a permanent 2,000-pound monument to the phrase, "You had one job." And in a beautifully American twist, we didn't scrap it. We embraced our most famous mistake and put it on display for the world to see. 41. Samuel Morse is famous for giving us the telegraph and Morse code. But in 1836, he had an even more radical idea that was about 150 years ahead of its time. He seriously proposed that every American citizen should carry a small, personal telegraph device for instant communication across the country. He had essentially envisioned the smartphone, but in an era where the fastest message delivery system was a guy on a horse. The idea was dismissed as pure fantasy, a laughable dream of a wild inventor. It's a strange and humbling thought. One of the 19th century's greatest minds had a perfect glimpse of the future, but nobody had the technology to build it yet. 42. In the 1800s, the state of Kentucky faced a public health crisis and decided to fight it with the full force of the law. The problem? People weren't bathing. So the legislature passed a law that required every citizen to take a bath at least once a year. Let that sink in. The government had to legally mandate an annual shower. This wasn't about promoting daily hygiene. This was a desperate attempt to get people to wash themselves just 4 times a decade. You have to wonder what the penalty was for non-compliance. A strongly worded letter? It stands as a testament to a time when basic cleanliness was not a given, but a government-enforced policy. 43. When you think of a military fort, you imagine stone, steel, and imposing walls. In 1921, the U.S. Army decided to innovate with a different material, cardboard. In a cost-cutting measure of epic foolishness, They constructed an entire fort meant to house soldiers out of pressed paper. The plan worked perfectly, right up until the first time it rained. The structure, predictably, dissolved into a soggy, pathetic mess, leaving the soldiers literally exposed to the elements. It was less of a military installation and more of a large, experimental compost pile. It proves that sometimes trying to save a buck can cost you your dignity and your roof. 44. During World War I, American patriotic fervor reached such a fever pitch that it started declaring war on words and even diseases. In a bizarre move of anti-German propaganda, the common illness known as German measles was officially renamed Liberty Measles. Because nothing screams freedom like a contagious viral infection that causes a full-body rash, sauerkraut was renamed Liberty Cabbage, and dachshunds became Liberty Hounds. It was a strange time when the government believed that changing the name of something would somehow help the war effort. Thankfully, the trend didn't last, and measles was allowed to be just measles again. 45. In the 1950s, during the height of the Cold War, the CIA launched a project that sounds like it was conceived during a very strange fever dream. It was called Acoustic Kitty, and the goal was to surgically implant microphones and transmitters into live cats, then train them to spy on Soviet officials. They spent millions of dollars on this feline espionage program. Their first and only field test ended in immediate disaster when the highly trained spy cat was released, wandered into the street, and was promptly run over by a taxi. The CIA learned a valuable lesson that day. You can't herd cats, and you certainly can't turn them into secret agents. 46. The quest for personal climate control is an eternal American struggle. In 1957, one inventor thought he had the answer: a wearable personal air conditioning unit. The device was a massive, clunky backpack contraption powered by gasoline, which cooled water that circulated through tubes in a vest. The wearer was treated to a constant stream of cool water, but also had to endure the noise and fumes of a lawnmower engine strapped to their back. It was heavy, loud, and made you look like a Ghostbuster with a serious design flaw. The invention failed, proving that sometimes it's just better to be sweaty. 47. When Texas applied for statehood in 1845, the U.S. Congress had a serious debate that sounds absurd today. Was Texas simply too big? Some members of Congress were so intimidated by its sheer size that they argued it should be divided into 5 smaller, more manageable states before being admitted to the Union. Imagine a world with West Texas, North Texas, and 3 other Texases all competing for the best barbecue. Ultimately, Congress decided to let Texas in as one giant, glorious state, ensuring that for the rest of history, Texas would never, ever let anyone forget how big it is. 48. Some wills leave you a house or a watch. In 1926, the will of a wealthy, eccentric Toronto lawyer named Charles Vance Miller kicked off a decade-long baby-making contest in the United States and Canada, known as the Great Stork Derby. He left the bulk of his massive fortune to the woman who could produce the most children in the 10 years following his death. This set off a frantic baby race among several families during the Great Depression, with some women having 9 or 10 babies to win the cash. It was a bizarre, chaotic, and legally messy spectacle fueled by one dead man's twisted sense of humor. 49. The 1940s were a time of great innovation, but not all ideas were created equal. In 1946, a man in Los Angeles patented a personal submarine, which was, in essence, a bathtub with a propeller and a periscope. While it technically worked, it never quite caught on. It turns out the market for a claustrophobic, underwater bathing experience where you share your bathwater with sharks and whatever else lives down there was surprisingly small. It was less of a submarine and more of the world's most dangerous hot tub, solving a problem that absolutely no one had. So there you have it, a collection of decisions that prove our ancestors were just as strange as we are, if not more so. Now for the important question. History is packed with terrible ideas, but which one from our list was so monumentally stupid, it genuinely worries you for the future? Drop your pick in the comments below. If you enjoy questioning the sanity of the past, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and ring the bell, because the rabbit hole of ridiculous history goes much, much deeper. A like is always appreciated.